open up. Oh.
Okay, go ahead.
We will open up this meeting of the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners for September 10th of 2020, and we'll begin with a flag salute. And I will lead it this time. How about that? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'd like to note that Commissioner Olson is not with us today. He's not feeling super well, and with the smoke in the air, it's not. I understand.
Good decision to stay home.
Yeah. And in light of the wildfires, I wrote a little statement. Is it okay if I read it during
Yes.
public? Okay. It's like we need to address.
Yeah, I wanted to as well. So
Okay.
thank you.
Do you want to go first?
No.
Okay. Okay, so this is my public comment then, I guess, in a way. The spread and the destruction of the wildfires over the last 3 days has been unprecedented. And my prayers go out to everyone displaced, those whose homes are lost, those whose businesses are gone, and the Oregonians who are grieving a missing family member. In our own county, we have people who are evacuated and people who are concerned and don't know where the fires are or where their family members are. In Yamhill County, businesses and fire districts and cities and individuals have all stepped up to help by slowing the fire, by getting residents evacuated, feeding them, and offering up help of all kinds, including in your neighborhood, Commissioner Wright. And while our county has been impacted by the fires, other counties and other Oregonians have been devastated. And I know that with the resources we have pulled together, we can reach out from our solid ground to help Oregonians back on their feet, back to firm ground and back to safety. And in the days ahead, I know that we will answer the call for help and extend that hand of help. Each and every one of us has a part, a responsibility in the rescue and the recovery and the building of our beautiful state. And I hope that Yamhill County residents can begin that process today. American Red Cross is taking donations, as is ORVAD, or ORVOAD, and I always forget the name of it, but it's orvoad.org.
Oregon Volunteer Organization.
Assisting in disasters.
Assistance, yeah.
We'll get it for you.
orvoad.org.
The fairgrounds need forage and funds for helping all the livestock that are now there. Your church can stock up on supplies and open up their parking lot. The universities can open up their vacant dorms. You can host a family fleeing the flames, and our fire districts are sending crews and have sent crews to counties to help them slow the fires, contain them, and begin rescue and recovery operations. And in the middle of all this destruction, may you find some peace and some calm by staying informed through the Sheriff's Office and the Office of Emergency Management's updates. And may you find peace by helping a friend or neighbor. And may we all build our communities together again. And the road ahead is long, but we'll go down it together. And Commissioner, do you want to say anything?
Thank you for that. That's I just want to say that it's pretty humbling to see, in this county has come under a lot of criticism. And when you see people working through the night, and when you get a call from your administrator, Ken Huffer, at midnight, and you know that your county council is on task in terms of an emergency declaration, and when you show up at midnight to sign it, and our emergency manager, Brian Young, and Carol Harland, and Daryl Flood, and Wendy Hackman, who are people who are volunteers, the last two, they don't get paid and they're working 12-hour shifts. CERT, that's manning the high school in Newburgh. And then talk about what all the county employees are doing that you don't even see, and to be grateful for the fact that these people truly care. And our first responders, until you have needed them and called them, and to see what they're going from fire to fire to fire, and they're putting their lives on the line, it's humbling to know that they do respond. So with what's going on at the fairgrounds, I was so impressed to see people in our community step up with everything that folks from out of town needed. They had nothing when they came here except their horses. And when you see folks who've gone shopping and brought supplies. It's just been an amazing thing. Yamhill County is a very giving community, and this is a time when people are putting aside all their differences, because the task at hand is, as Commissioner that you mentioned, is to step up and take care of people who need it. So I just want to say, really prayers for the folks who have been evacuated, and gratitude for all those who are here to help us. It's very humbling.
Thank you. Whew. We will march on into our business here at hand. But I want to acknowledge, again, many thanks to Ken, County Administrator, and Christian and staff for just getting things going and keeping them moving. We will move on to our work session, and this time is reserved for topics of discussion scheduled for the commissioners in advance. And work session today is review and discussion of the transit district. But I would suggest,
And Commissioner, I was going to, in light of Rick not being here, and as Rick is the liaison to transit, and I know this was a topic that he was wanting to bring forward as a work session, I was going to suggest that we reschedule the work session to a later date when Rick's feeling better and able to join us.
that sounds great, Commissioner.
Great idea,
Yeah.
because he's been at the forefront of this for years. So
Yeah.
I would feel better knowing he was talking about it with us.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. We will
Thank you.
reschedule.
And Cynthia was going to join us via phone,
Mhm.
and I've already sent an email that gave her a heads up just a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
That, I was going to recommend this, so we'll get something on the calendar and get it rescheduled.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Move on to the consent agenda, which is item E then, or we end our work session. We'll do that formally. We move on to item E, which is our consent agenda, and we have none today. We move on to item F, which is old business, and we have none. Move on to item G, which is other business, and item G1 is consideration of approval of a 2.9% CPI increase for Recology Western Oregon for solid waste collection services in Yamaha County. And we have, I believe, Dave Larmuth with us. I mean, you have a really colorful mask, so I just wanted to make sure that it was in fact you. So please join us at the table. And Ken, can we get your welcome, Dave.
Welcome.
Good morning. Can you state your name and your responsibilities, at least for the record?
Sure. Dave Larman, the rate analyst for Recology Western Oregon.
And do you want to give us an introduction to, I mean, we have the cover sheet here and all the information, but if Commissioner, you'd like to hear more from him.
Well, I was looking at I call it the justification
Yeah,
in terms
exactly.
of the tables and that. And the only thing I would ask is when we look at those in terms of calculating an increase, it's pretty formulaic, and we kind of go through this, every so often. What is it? Every 3 years?
Every year.
Every year.
Every year for this
Okay.
one. Yeah.
So I just wanted to just maybe if you could just make that statement in terms of it is not sort of it's something that we do on a regular basis.
Commissioner, that's correct. We have an annual rate review process, and typically if our projections put us inside the range that's spelled out in the contract, we normally request an adjustment based on the change in the consumer price index. The two differences for this year is we used an earlier month of the index than we usually do. So this is in mid-March, we made our proposal, and we proposed to use the information from the February index because it was the most current we had at that time. We weren't certain that there would be index, and the sub-index that we used released for March or April with the advent of the COVID situation. So our proposal was to use what the most current data we had at that time, which was the February index, and to push out the effective date of the requested adjustment from July 1st out to October 1st. And so the proposal you have before you is different in those two respects. It's a different month than usual, and it's a later effective date than what's usual.
And can you share with us a little bit more about the difference between the April CPI and the February CPI, and the comment about the CPI may not accurately reflect the changes in expenses we expect to see after the crisis?
Sure. So the way that we build our cost of service projections are based on what we reasonably think will happen during the time that the rates are to be effective. And so the temporary change that we saw in the CPI index for so in March, looking forward, we weren't sure what those numbers were going to look like. As it turns out, the CPI index, I believe, for April may have been 1.5% instead. But because we're basing these future rates on what we think will happen next year, we thought that looking at the last two normal ones would give us a better idea of what those costs will do and what we hope will be fairly normal operating conditions for the coming year, basically from October through to middle of next year.
Okay. So you're asking for essentially a larger rate increase based upon the CPI that you've chosen, rather than the CPI that you normally, the monthly CPI that you normally use, which would be a smaller rate increase, is what it would round out to.
Right. Again,
I just want to put that out there.
Sure.
That
That
looks
was our
bad.
position in March, was to use the most recent data that we had available and to lock in that and again push out the effective date.
So in terms of the CPI used, typically there was a Portland CPI used, and that's not the case anymore, correct?
That's correct. I mean, there used to be a Portland-based index, and I believe our agreement, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it specifies the CPI-U for the Western region for the BC size class, which is a population designation. There is, I believe, still a Portland-based index. I don't think that's what's in this agreement, and I think the agreements that we do have that reference that have been updated because that index is no longer available monthly.
Okay, thank you.
Considering that, I'm just reading this. I'm trying to, I looked at our contract a long time ago, but raising rates right now based upon a month that you don't normally use as your month of determination. I'm hesitant about that. And I guess your organization believes that the 2.9% will be the need based upon what your costs will be and your expenses in the coming year, right?
Right, that's correct.
Okay. I just know that in our own conversations about other things, we end up looking at what the actual CPI is rather than what one specific month was that was essentially chosen for its number. So,
Commissioner, just to clarify, it was chosen because it was the most recent data we had available when we had to submit our reports. So typically we submit a report in April that says we'll send you a letter in June based on the numbers we get in May, which are the CPI index from April. And so having to make the decision in March, we went with the index that was the most recent that we had.
So it says that we shall use an amount equal to the percentage change in the CPI for the year ending in April. So what does the year's CPI look like as opposed to 1 month's? I mean, that's just
So-
what it says right here.
Sure, I believe the intent is that for that 12-month period.
Okay.
So what's the change from April of 2020 index number versus the number of the index from April of 2019? So that
Right.
what amounts to the 12-month change in that index.
Yeah.
Expressed as a percentage.
Right. But you used the CPI for, it looks like just for 1 month, or did you use it for February 19 to February 20?
Right, it would represent the annual change
Okay.
from so the February index, whatever that number is.
Yeah.
147.6, whatever. it is.
Yeah.
Compared to what that number was in February of 2019.
Okay, and so if you did the same thing for April 19 to April 2020, you get 1.5%.
I believe that's correct. I don't have that in front of me, but I believe that's.
Okay.
I just have a quick
Yeah,
question
please.
before you go to
No,
the
no,
next
that I was
thought.
that my eyebrows raising were to let you ask you.
Okay, I think it's important to make a distinction about the CPI increase and also as that relates to cost of doing business. So if you could speak to that, so that we're looking at, so in other words, you're looking at a projected costs of the increase in costs, to do business. How does that relate to the 2.9?
So the 2.9% was the Bureau of Economic Statistics, I believe that's right. So a government body produces a CPI index every month, and it's their evaluation of all of the different costs of services and goods that are flowing around the economy. So it's not our assessment of it. We use it as sort of an independent assessment of what costs have changed over that time period that's being examined.
Okay, I guess I didn't ask correctly. I guess what I'm asking is when you factor in terms of the cost of doing business, when you have figured out what those numbers are going to look like and statistically what that percentage increase would be, how does that compare to the 2.9%? Or are you just, because you have to have done the numbers to show a projected increase in the cost of doing business for the company. And I just wanted to know if that could be sort of squared up. Am I asking that?
I think I understand what you're
Okay.
saying, Commissioner, but I'm not sure that we've done that.
You don't
specifically.
do it that way.
I don't
Okay.
believe so, no.
Is that ever when you're sitting down and doing, figuring things out in terms of projections, looking at that and ever compare it to the CPI figure that you're going to use in asking for that increase? Just wondering about what the difference would be if there was one.
I understand, I think, Commissioner, what you're asking, but no, I don't think we've specifically done that, ma'am.
Okay.
We know for individual line items, based on our budgeting and our projections, for example, that if our labor costs are set to go up 2% based on the union contract, we would know that number. And then we'd have projections on what we think fuel costs might be.
Right.
When we make submissions, we have usually a guess about what the landfill rates for disposal will be, but we don't know for sure until those new rates are
Right.
in effect. Those are the big three factors and change. And I don't have it in front of me, but the disposal cost, for example, at Riverbend went up. I believe it was 3% this year over last year for the rate that we pay to dispose of trash that we collect.
Okay, thank you.
So I want to come back to, I'm just concerned that we're being asked to approve something that's outside of what appears to be how you normally address it, as in you would normally do an April of year X minus 1 to a year of April X. And instead we're shifting it because you like the numbers better, is what I'm hearing. You think that they better reflect your expenses going forward. But the contract, isn't it correct, is for the year ending April?
That's right. We also don't know that number until mid-May. And so part of it was like I said, when we had the proposal on our desks in mid-March, we proposed to use the most recent information available. The contract also calls for a July 1st increase. And so that's the other part of this is we propose to push that out. So that's also not in the letter of the contract. And I understand that looking back now, we can look at the other months. But I would ask you to consider the position that we were in when the proposal was made in mid-March. And so I don't think we chose it because we liked numbers better. We chose it because we didn't have confidence that there would be a CPI index in April. The information we had at the time is that there may be a national index, but depending on the number of businesses that were or were not able to respond to the surveys that government sends out, if everybody, all those businesses are closed, they don't answer. Since then, they've done more publications about that, sort of explaining how they fill in the gaps when they can't do the survey as extensively as they normally do. So they did end up producing indexes for those months. But again, in March, we weren't confident that that would be the case. So that's how we got to where we are.
Okay, because it does say here, there's a quote from you. I'm guessing it's a quote from you in the cover letter, the memo from Solid Waste that says that we use the index for February rather than April, quote, as we expect that due to the current economic situation, the CPI for upcoming months will not accurately reflect the changes in expenses we expect to see after the crisis. And that seems to be a little bit different than your explanation just now. But
right. So I guess I'm providing. I'm trying to provide additional.
Additional information. Okay.
The part one is that we didn't know what the index would look like and would it accurately reflect what we think our expenses will be once things are normal again. Part two was we weren't sure there'd be an index at all. Yeah. So I guess there are two parts.
Okay.
I would just say, clarifying for myself that in terms of you have one shot at getting an increase as per your contract, one shot. So based on what your projections were, looking at the economic situation, which is unprecedented, you had to make a decision on what it was going to look like when things evened out and became more normalized again. So I don't think that's at odds with what you're asking. It seems to be a rational approach to trying to predict the future, which none of us can because we've never had this situation before. So while I understand your questions, I do think it's reasonable to assume that you're just trying to manage what it likely will look like for your need for an increase. That's the way I'm looking at it. But I did have the same questions, but I think that it doesn't. I don't think it's unreasonable.
One question I have has Recology looked at what the July to July looks like, or the June to June. I'm curious about whether March and April were so anomalous that you have a better sense of what inflation will be like, or may be like, based upon what you've seen in the previous year. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I don't have the specific numbers for what this index was for June, July, but typically the annual change tends to be between 2% and 3%. So I would guess that when the August numbers come out in month, this is middle.
I think we're in September.
We're in extra March. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We're March 5th.
So when those numbers come out, I would expect they'll be somewhere closer to that 2 to 3%.
Okay. Okay. So it sounds like then March and April were so anomalous that they somehow dropped the entire year down to 1.5. Is that what you said? Compared to the previous months. I'm just trying to think about like mathematically how that's, I mean, I'm sure that your statisticians and the Bureau of Statistics are really good at this, but like that's a really big change. You know what I mean? Like 10 months versus 2 months and dropping it from 2.9 to 1.5. If I do the math, it's really challenging to get to that. So,
right, I'm not sure that it works that way. It's more of the difference between the 2 points in time as opposed to the average of all of the months in between. There are different indexes that use that as sort of a 12-month average of the changes as opposed to the point in time versus previous point in time.
Okay.
So there are different ways to use these things.
Yeah.
The same information.
Commissioner, do you have any additional thoughts?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. Well, would you like to make do I have a motion on the floor at all? Would you like to make a motion or shall I?
Go ahead,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
All right. Well, I move that we approve item G1. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Record show unanimous approval of item G1. Thank you.
Thanks
I
a
almost
lot,
called you
Dave.
Mr. Thank you, Dave. Mara.
Thank you, Dave. And thank you, Commissioner, for your questions.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Move on to item G2, which is consideration of approval of amendment number 1 to an agreement between Yamhill County and Dow LLC, previously known as BOC Consulting Engineers, which is Board Order 19-79 for consulting and engineering services, extending the completion date to March 1st of 2021 for bridge design and construction of the Stag Hollow Bridge on the Yamhill Westsider Trail. And Ken or Christian, do you want to add anything?
It's just, again, with the current pending land use that, and we still have the project, we have this agreement, so this amendment is just to update that timeline. So depending on the outcome of the land use decision, if work can resume, we can continue to have Dow available to assist us with that.
Okay.
This is going to get very interesting.
Don't worry, I'm doing the math in my head.
Are you doing the math?
I'm really good at
1 and
math.
1 equals. No, maybe our county council can shed some light on
Thank you,
this
Dave.
in terms of, thank you, Dave. In terms of the extension and absent an extension, what is the outcome absent an extension?
So the original agreement actually, the completion date was actually in March of 2020. So we've been operating sort of beyond the currently agreed upon extension date for several months. If this were not to be extended, then the agreement would end and we need to reconcile with Dow back to March of this year. So it would be a significant administrative undertaking, and the work's not quite completed. My understanding is they're still finalizing the design. I think it's close to being done on the design of those final 2 bridges. So, I mean, if this is something that we need to sit over until next week, I think that's certainly possible.
Yeah.
Well, you can get set over and not to, again, ordinance 900 does have a provision that should there be a tie vote on this, then it would automatically be carried over to the next meeting, and then the absent commissioner would be able to vote on that.
Okay, I couldn't remember that with the tie.
Section 5.03 of ordinance 900.
And this is simply there's not there's no immediate rush. It's simply the stars aligned for this to be on today's agenda and for Commissioner Olson to be absent. So
Yeah.
there isn't any reason why we couldn't. The board was okay with that to set this over, or if we wanted to take an action, reconsider it next week. Then.
So the reason why in the past I've been concerned about these contracts is because I felt that there would be, should there be any pushback or any particular conflict in terms of lawsuits or ongoing litigation, we would not be able to live up to the contracts, and we could face some significant, having to pay contracts back and having to pay money back. And so I was always concerned about that happening. And so I would not be in favor of extending this, because I think what we continue to do is not to acknowledge that we have a fairly long-standing litigation perhaps ahead of us. So I would assume at this point, we might want to set it over, because it would, I'm guessing, just
Yeah.
wild guess, that it might be
supportive
1-1.
I would be supportive of extending the contract. I'll just,
Okay. So I
show
can
my
s-
cards.
Well, I can understand the rationale for wanting to extend it,
Mhm.
but I also think that this is exactly the type of liability we faced in some of the contracts we entered into, when there was perhaps some doubt that we could actually fulfill that.
Mhm.
So I think this is what we're doing here, and I wouldn't necessarily condone that. So
Yeah.
perhaps it's a good thing to wait for
Okay.
Commissioner Olson.
That sounds good. Well, let's set this aside and bring it back as, we would call it old business
Yeah.
for next week.
It would come forward as old.
Okay.
Do we need a motion or no?
No, if there's consensus not to, and there was no motion made on the item, there's consensus to move it forward the next week, we should be fine.
Okay. Great, thank you. Move on to item G3, and that's consideration of approval of amendment number 2 to agreement 156502 between Yamaha County and Oregon Health Authority. Just board order 18-77 for grant funding for the medication assisted treatment in the Yamaha County Correctional Facility through September 30th of 2020. And normally I would say, Commissioner Olson, do you want anything to add? But this is a crossing areas. Commissioner Sterrett, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do. Well, I just had a question originally, and then I wound up through the sheriff's office getting some clarification on why it was just extended through the 30th.
Mhm.
But in order to do the longer term contract, they had to do this interim. And interestingly enough, we haven't had enough inmates who were accessing the MAT program. So that whole dynamic shifted, although we do have the MAT program going outside once they've been released. This was a difference in the number of people we were actually, who were taking part in this program in the jail.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad you reached out.
I would move approval of item G3.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item G3. And thank you, Commissioner. And thanks for your work on keeping it moving and being a supporter. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Item G4 is consideration of approval of equipment upgrades and a 3-year maintenance agreement from Gemalto for the live scan fingerprint scanners used in the Yamhill County Correctional Facility and court security in the amount of $45,524. And we don't have, again, Commissioner Bolton is the court security liaison and Commissioner liaison to criminal justice. But Ken, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I don't think.
I believe that the memo was great.
Other than the memo, I don't have any other further information on this.
Great. Well, I would move approval then of item G4. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item G4. Item G5 is consideration of approval of an agreement between Yamhill County Transit and Access Plus Mobility Solutions for the Phase 1 bus stop project effective September 20th through September 2020 through September 2021 in the amount of $32,000. And Ken, is there anything you would like to add?
This one I can't speak to.
Okay.
There is a memorandum and information that Cynthia put together. And this, again, this is implementation of one of the identified elements of the transit plan. And so this is helping to implement that project.
It's good to see each piece of the transit plan being implemented. So
And the thing is when you hear so many people in the county say they are not even aware of our transit system, it's because part of it is bus stops aren't marked.
yeah,
And this is a part of actually marketing, I think. Once you get that labeled and that branded, they know, okay, there's a bus stop, so I'm going to look into it.
yeah,
And I also appreciated the scope of work as far as what they're going to do that we don't have to do in terms of land use situations and trying to navigate the permitting process or rights of way if it's a private piece of land. So
Yeah.
that seemed pretty complex.
yeah, I agree.
And especially with the number of jurisdictions that we're working, that are having to work with, for right-of-way permits and everything else that goes into this. It putting in a bus stop sounds simple if you just say it that way.
It sure
but when you
does.
Look at the permitting and everything else and the design and ADA and all the various elements and the traffic considerations. There's a lot to a project like this.
Yes. Yeah, and it's part of the background information in the board packet includes, we heard loud and clear during the TDP process that not having bus stops marked was one of the biggest problems for current riders and attracting new riders. And then really consistently, that's what I hear from people who are new riders. They say, hey, y'all, I need some help here.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that this is moving forward.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I would move approval then of item G5 unless there's further discussion.
Commissioners, I would just add.
Oh, yes.
Approve this subject to final review by county council. I've been working with Cynthia on this
Okay.
agreement. I just haven't had a chance to look through the final draft. I don't expect there to be major changes, but if you wouldn't mind doing it that way, then in case there are some things we need to finalize, we have the authority to do that. And obviously, if there was any sort of a material change, that would then come back to the board.
Okay, great. Well, I will amend my motion to approve item G5, subject to approval of county council on the contract. Be the accurate language, Christian. Okay, great. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Record show unanimous approval of item G5. Item G6 is consideration of approval to authorize Lindsay Manfred or designee on behalf of Yamaha County Public Health to submit an application for funding from Oregon Health Science University, Oregon Center for Children and Youth with Special Health Needs, in the amount of $15,000. And Commissioner, would you like to add anything?
Just that this cocoon program, which we've been doing for years, helps, and there's no age limit here, families who have significant medically fragile or complex medical needs for their children that they could never navigate on their own. I think it's a worthwhile program, and this just sort of a coordination platform.
Right.
So I would move approval.
Right, especially in a time when we can't all just get together.
Right.
Yes. Okay, thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The records show unanimous approval of item G6. Item G7 is consideration of approval of the 2020 through 2021 Oregon Department of Veterans Services application for the purpose of receiving support funds for the 2020 through 2021 fiscal year in the amount of $116,245. And I was delighted. I got to, for some reason, because of the protocols, I received the first announcement of the support funding, and I was delighted, and then I made sure to forward it on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important for us to look at just not only what does the county put in, what does the state put in, what are we funding?
Mhm.
And that's why Yamhill County really does have a significant impact in veterans
Yep.
and outreach especially.
Yes, yeah, especially on the outreach side.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, well, fantastic. Well, I would move approval then of item G7. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Records show unanimous approval of item G7. Item G8 is consideration of approval of authorizing appropriation authority in Fund 11 for the 2020-2021 fiscal year in the amount of $75,000 to bid on a 2012 New Holland tractor with a brush cutter for Public Works. And you've got the board memo, and Russ is very excited about this tool. So in a time when we're, Yes.
I just wanted to clarify that we're, just terminology, it's not really authorizing additional appropriation authority. That's more of a budgetary term.
Yeah.
They're looking at doing this within their current appropriation authority. They are strictly just looking for authority to be able to bid on this piece of equipment.
Right.
It's, procurement rules and purchasing rules don't necessarily have provisions for bidding on something when an opportunity comes up for a piece of equipment, that we can't necessarily bring a purchase and sale agreement before you to say, hey, we're going to buy this. This is something that they've been looking at. So they're looking simply for authority to be able to bid on this, because keeping in mind, if we have a winning bid, then we kind of circumvent the process.
Right. That's a good clarification.
But again, they're not requesting additional appropriation authority. That has a different meaning under budget.
That's what I thought.
So they're just looking for authority to bid on this and make this purchase.
Yes. Yes. And the county's public works have become more proactive in their brushing, including, and I know we've talked about this before, there's multiple contract brushers now as well. And that's been great, because they're oftentimes contractors who live on rural roads, so they know the need for brushing. And to me, it really helps having people who know the need on that particular road.
Yes.
Yeah.
Local
So
is
far,
always
it's been a
good.
great. Yeah, exactly.
So, I'd like to recommend that, prior to a motion being made that
Yeah.
this agenda item, it would probably be better that it's consideration of authorizing Public Works to bid on a 2012 New Holland tractor with brush cutter with a not to exceed amount of $75,000.
All right. I would move approval of item G8 as amended to say consideration of approval to authorize Public Works to bid on a 2012 New Holland tractor with a brush cutter in the not to exceed amount of $75,000. I accurately reflect your. Okay, great. Any further? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The records show unanimous approval of item G8 as amended. Item G9 is consideration of approval of authorizing the position authority in the sheriff's office, adding a 1.0 FTE or a full-time equivalent health and safety compliance deputy. And there's language in the board packet, but Commissioner.
Well, my first question was, after the 2-year grant funding runs out, how are we going to absorb this in a budget which we have consistently had some difficulties with? I guess in my position is, nowadays, it's not just a COVID-related compliance situation, it's everything in terms of that risk management.
Right.
So I'm just wondering about the ongoing budget consideration.
Right. Unlike the previous agenda item, this is actually a budgetary item where they're asking for additional position authority to fill this position. And as was provided in the memo, this is related to the COVID-19 related grant that the Sheriff's Office and Department of Community Justice did receive to fund this position.
Right.
As far as the sheriff's long-term plans, I don't, maybe you can speak to it more specifically, but recognizing that like any other department or division where we have a position that is currently funded, and knowing that we do annual budgeting, that should resources not be there or position, then that's at that point would be a reevaluation of what the long-term, if this is going to be a position that's going to continue into the future, funded with other resources, other grant opportunities, or,
Right.
and I see that this is a deputy position, so maybe just knowing that that may be more the seamless transfer if there's less of a need for the health and safety compliance portion of it, that maybe this position just rolls into becoming a deputy and other things. But the sheriff, if there's questions about it, we could see if the sheriff is available to answer that.
Right.
Well, my question to the sheriff was about, is this going to be an additional FTE or an existing staff member? And their plan is to use an existing staff member, pay for the training with this funding, and then backfill with another deputy position. So I would imagine, and that's the information I got.
Yeah, and if that's the information that's being shared, that kind of contradicts what's being requested here, because they're asking for additional position authority,
Mhm.
which means that you're adding an
You're adding
additional
addition.
FTE to the budget. And
But they are adding, because the new
Mhm.
deputy will replace what the
The
existing deputy once
Okay.
trained
is
for this
doing-
position. So
Right.
it's just a wash, but
Mhm.
it is an
Okay.
additional
And it's
position.
a new position in terms of there's a new just job description.
Right.
And expectations.
Right. So I had asked, knowing we have a risk manager now and how we're really focusing on that type of work, how closely will they work with our existing HR and risk management? And the intention is to do that.
Yeah.
So I felt, in light of what we're dealing in terms of liabilities, the sheriff's department office is probably not a bad place to have that,
Yeah.
especially since it's being paid for 2 years.
Right. The 2 years, I felt like that was a good, a good starting point. It seems similar to the MAT, which I wasn't here to approve the grant, but when you approve the grant, it was like, okay, well, let's get this started because we know it's important, we know we need it, and then we'll figure out, kind of beyond that.
Right.
And, I would anticipate this type of position, and especially seeing how it's not, it's the county that carries the insurance and provides the insurance. So anything, recognizing that every employee within Yamaha County has a certain responsibility and expectation when it comes to risk management on a day-to-day basis. But with this position being specifically to provide support and help, that they will be working closely with the county risk manager, HR, and county council.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. After talking with the sheriff, I was comfortable, especially with the okay, we got 2 years. He expressed that this is something that they've needed in the jail, they're in the correctional facility, but they haven't had the funding for, and he didn't feel like it was reasonable at the time, at other times, to bring it forward. So I think he sees the opportunity with knowing that they need to do this around COVID anyway. I know that there was I feel like he mentioned to me that they're, they're looking at adding a piece of software that's an internal affairs database as well. That this person, I believe, is part of managing that, which would be for recording incidents, with inmates and with personnel in one, place, and then that would be that would communicate as necessary with the state and the federal authorities too. So I was like, okay, he's looking at it from a big perspective.
And I'll just
now.
put out, the sheriff was just trying to call me on my cell
Oh,
phone.
okay.
That's why I paused for a minute. So if there's an interest, if we want to have the sheriff join, if there's questions specific about this.
Right.
he may be
Commissioner,
available.
do you want to do any additional questions?
No,
Okay, it sounds like you got it.
it's nice to know that the sheriff is eavesdropping on us.
Hello.
Sheriff?
Well, I mean, he's just right there.
You're right. Where is he?
Through a lot
He's
of
everywhere.
stone. Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so
I
so
feel-
to clarify,
sorry.
you can add the additional FTE. It does, that's, because they'll need to add the FTE, and it's a little bit different if they're gonna take an existing staff and apply it, but then backfill, that's another mechanic that's outside the budget, but obviously they need the additional FTE.
Right. Because a new position, even though it's different between a personnel and a position, right?
Right.
Right.
Did we get that right, Sheriff?
Hello.
Not calling.
None of my stuff is buzzing either. Okay, well, if there are no further discussions, then I would move approval of item G9. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Record show unanimous approval of item G9. Item G10 is consideration of adopting resolution 20-20 20-09-10-1, proclaiming September 21st through the 27th of 2020 as Diaper Need Awareness Week. I'm gonna pull it up right now. Commissioner, do you want to add anything?
I do.
Okay, great.
I want to say that before you joined us, Mr. Chair, we had a board that, we had a challenge. And we said, okay, we need to fill up we need to get every diaper bank drop-off site filled.
Full.
And we were
Yeah.
able to issue a challenge that not only would the commissioners commit to helping with that effort, but asking everybody else. And it seems like it's one of those things where who even thinks about that?
Mhm.
But when you look at the price of disposable diapers and you see what it costs, people who are really struggling right now more than anything, should a baby really have to bear the brunt of a cost savings when it comes to comfort and health.
Right.
So it's a big deal because a
It
little
is.
kid, a baby, is necessarily going to be affected. And I think we need to pay more attention to these types of needs.
That sounds great.
You going to read that?
I will read it unless you want to.
No.
Okay, I've
Go
got
right
it in
ahead.
front of me.
Go
so-
right ahead.
All right. I'm going to read into the record the resolution in support of Diaper Needs Awareness Week. The Board of Commissioners of the State of Oregon for the County of Yamhill, sitting for the transaction of county business in the matter of a resolution in support of Diaper Needs Awareness Week, which is September 21st through 27th of 2020, also known as Resolution 20-09-10-1. Whereas a lack of access to a sufficient supply of clean diapers can adversely affect the health and welfare of infants, toddlers, and their families. And whereas in the United States, 1 in 3 families report needing diapers for an infant or toddler, and 48% of families delay changing a diaper to extend their supply. And whereas there are no government assistance programs for the purchase or provision of diapers, and a sufficient supply of diapers can cost as much as 6% of a full-time minimum wage worker's salary. And whereas a supply of diapers is generally required for infants and toddlers to participate in quality childcare and early education programs. And whereas addressing diaper needs can lead to economic opportunity for the state's low-income families and can lead to improved health of our communities. And whereas Yamhill County is proud to be home to a family-placed diaper bank and recognizes the importance of diapers in helping provide economic stability for families. Now, therefore, the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners do hereby proclaim September 21st through the 27th of 2020 as Diaper Need Awareness Week, done this 10th day of September of 2020. Thank you, Commissioner, for bringing it forward and giving us the context, especially for the public.
And just to let everybody
Yes.
know, if you're looking to drop off diapers, if you want to go to the Family Place website, there'll be a list of
Yes.
drop-off places. If you can order a case from Amazon, or if you can find some locally or go to Costco or wherever you get them in quantity, there's no question about the fact that there's always going to be a need for them.
Yes. Great. Thank you for that. All right. Well, I would move approval then of item G10. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Record show unanimous approval of item G10. Item G11 is consideration of ratifying a declaration of a state of emergency within Yamhill County. And we have a document in front of us, including my very poor handwriting. There's only a little bit of my handwriting, but
I want to thank you for answering the call to come and sign that.
the
Because
literal.
that's the protocol, somebody's got to come down and sign it, and then it would be ratified at the next meeting.
It did take him 2 rings, or, two calls. So I had actually stuffed my county phone in an evacuation bag. So it was a little bit dampened, which is why I didn't hear it.
But you got, how long did it take from the time you called?
It was probably 22 minutes, even though I said it would be 17.
I'm not sure, because we were calling multiple, the sheriff and I, because once we drafted it right there on the spot in the EOC when we, and also talking to Christian while he was also in the process of very busy at his home.
Yes.
So there is a protocol and a list under ordinance 883 as far as going through the list of the commissioners. So we were calling But also recognizing that, if we hadn't heard back, then, from any of the unable to contact the commissioner, next on the list would have been the sheriff, and then I would have been after the sheriff. But of course, the two of us were working on this, so, and
I told him that I had a delay because I realized I should probably give my wife a kiss and let her know that I was leaving.
Well, it was what, 12:15?
yeah. And you
Well,
both responded
11:40.
right about the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, and then when I got back to you, you said, never mind.
Right.
We've
Never mind.
already heard
I
from,
just
never
awakened
mind.
you in the night
Well,
for a
I
wildfire.
haven't been sleeping because I'm kind of on fire watch.
That's right.
So when I saw that, it was like, oh, wow, it was surreal, and then
Mm-hmm.
to actually talk to you at midnight was a very, very strange occurrence.
Yes. Yes. I did go outside for that phone call. Small house. But thank you for, working through the night.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
thanks to the EOC.
Well, I want to thank Ken and the sheriff for pulling all this together. The only thing I would add is I think we need to put a end date in here that it will continue through, and then it will be up to you to decide the end of the month, unless it was terminated earlier. I would suggest maybe through the end of September.
I thought that was in there.
Well, what it says is it will continue until terminated, and we need to have similar to the other emergency declarations that we've declared this year, we need to have an end date. And so I would just say that if the board wants to talk about what that end date may look like, I would just say maybe through the end of September. Hopefully things will have been resolved by then.
And
But
I'll add
it will be
whichever comes
terminated
first.
earlier
Yeah.
if the board chose to act sooner than that. Yeah.
That sounds good. And then this is one that we'll read into the record, correct?
No.
Oh, because it's also a board order.
Right. We could just handwrite that in there.
Okay.
Because that would be tied to the motion, because we're basically, the declared emergency is already in place. This is
Yeah.
a ratification.
It's ratification.
So
Right.
the motion could put that additional language as far as the term date as part of the motion.
Mhm.
That'd be part of the record.
I agree.
And for the record, it was that the county has suffered widespread or severe damage, injury, or loss of life and property, and determined that there's an imminent threat of widespread or severe damage, injury, or loss of property resulting from the Chehalis Mountain Fire and the Henry Hagg Lake Fire, and impacting multiple areas of Yamhill County. So I want to put that into the record. This is why we're doing this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would make a motion to approve.
All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Record show unanimous approval of item G11, which is the ratification of a declaration of a state of emergency. And
Well,
thank you for,
While we're talking about emergency declarations, I want to just remind you that the COVID-19 emergency declaration that's been extended a couple of times is currently extended through the end of September. So after today, there are 2 additional scheduled work sessions before the end of the month to think about or consider whether we are going to be needing to extend that further.
Thank you. Nothing like having overlap.
And next will come the wild locust emergency declaration.
I heard rain of blood is what somebody told me. So
Yeah, is that next?
it is actually, it's the locust first. I'm
Is
pretty
it
sure.
locust?
Yeah. To put a little bit of humor into what's otherwise a lot of tragedy and a lot of challenges and a lot of tension for people. Yeah. Well, thank you. We will move on to item H, which is public hearings, and we have none today. And we'll move on to item I, which is announcements. And Commissioner, did you have your Wednesday with Leah Horner?
No, she canceled.
Okay.
But what I do want to say is I did have a conversation with Stacy Lake, who is the district manager for DHS.
Oh,
And
yeah.
as you know, they've heard us and we're working on getting a parent navigator for someone to help in our county. We've
Yes.
got some significant issues we want to work through. And Stacy Lake told me that instead of having a program manager that does Marion, Polk, and Yamhill, we're going to get our own. I guess we're the problem child, and they want to make sure we have lots of extra attention, and I'm all for that. So we're excited about that and excited about the plan moving forward on how we're going to help keep basically it's a preemptive thing to keep kids from being removed
Yeah.
at the 11th hour, even if it's a Saturday night, to make that call. Who do they call? What do we do to keep that child in the home?
Right.
And that's been a significant problem here. So we're working on that. And
Great.
I think that's it at this point, other than to just say, again, a shout out to our folks at Emergency Operations Center and Brian Young.
Yes. Okay, great. And I was on, the governor called chairs together on, what day is today? It's Thursday.
Tuesday?
I'm pretty
Wednesday.
sure it was Wednesday. Isn't this terrible?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure at 3:00 on Wednesday. But she had her press conference at 1 p.m. and then the meeting with the chairs. And I've never seen so much emotion, among people who are some of the leaders of their counties and the staff in the governor's office. Chair Nyquist told us a really tragic story on very little sleep, I might add. And a couple of chairs were not there because they were helping with evacuations in their communities. But there was a lot of folks who shared very important information with the governor. And unlike some other meetings you've been at, for example, where it's like, well, we'll look into that. Their whole staff was on providing an answer or giving them the contact information for somebody in that moment, which was really, it felt like a real big shift. So it was like, here's the phone number and we're sending the insurance commissioner out to your county's evacuation spot, for example. Like Lynn County, it was like, we're going to send we're going to get your folks started on insurance claims right now. The National Guard Adjutant Major General, and I probably got that wrong, agreed and explained how he could provide National Guard troops for essentially security checkpoints to make sure that the areas that have been evacuated stay safe, so that when people come back into their homes and their areas, that they haven't been looted or destroyed by others. So there were some very specific things that commissioners got answers to in that moment, and that was wonderful to see, as well as being hard. I told a little story about my mom walking down 101 yesterday in Lincoln City, having been evacuated from the hospital. I mean, she's a nurse, so it was okay that she was at the hospital. But yeah, so I'm realizing this is because it's statewide and we're so connected, it's affecting everybody, whether it's a fire in the forest behind your house, or whether it's a family member who has been evacuated. So,
And the other thing is that when you look at how interconnected we are for mutual aid, even if they're informal mutual aid
Yeah.
agreements. So right now, helping Polk and Marion and how we're all there really is no county line when it comes to this type of work, and that's been really impressive too.
yeah. And I'm on the call, I guess this is shifting a little bit, but on the call last night with the sheriff and Brian Young, which I apologize was short notice. I think you got an email for it, but among many emails. And I muted everybody so Commissioner Starrett couldn't see.
No, I know why you did that, Commissioner, and I'm not buying your excuse. It was a convenient excuse, but
But you had Joya.
I had Joya. I typed my questions to Joya.
But I think it was 11,700 new signups for the county's emergency
Yes.
alert system. And there've been some questions from people who they didn't. I got an email from somebody who got a knock on their door but didn't get the phone call, and they were concerned about that, not because they knew that their area was supposed to be evacuated, but they were concerned that they didn't get the call. So I still have some questions in about how long it takes to get into the queue, as it were, but we'll figure that out.
And one of the things is that people don't understand you actually have to sign up, opt in for that.
Yeah.
And I would also been telling people opt into neighboring counties, because as we're seeing in the
It's a
various,
great point.
we've got Washington County overlap, Clackamas County overlap.
Mhm.
So sign up for their alerts as well.
That's a really good point.
And the other thing is update. Go on our website and update your contact information if that's changed.
Yes.
And I would,
Oh, yeah.
I would just clarify, because as I was learning about, even myself learning more about the notification system, it's not necessarily a place to look for a news feed
Right.
on what's happening in the county, because you only get information based on your address. If there's a notification that goes out and it's based on your address, if there's an evacuation notice or some type of notice that emergency management puts out, it only goes to those impacted addresses
Right.
within that area. So
Right.
I think
That's a really
Brian
good point.
helped provide some clarification when I had discussions with them yesterday afternoon about that you're not going to see it, if you're not seeing information, it's, and chances are it's because your address you have loaded in there is not included in the area that the notice is going out to, but again, that's a little bit different than if you're in that area in the load up time and you should be getting it versus, like myself, I live in McMinnville and, I wasn't seeing feeds or information because McMinnville is not one of those areas that's being directly impacted when you're getting those notices.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that your suggestion is a really good one about those people who are right at the county line, because while fires, for example, don't really they don't care about those lines that we draw on things. We still do have to do the dance of, when a fire comes in over Chehalis Mountain, then it's Yamaha County Sheriff's deputies who are suddenly the ones taking care of road closures and checkpoints, and not Washington County. So I think that's probably part of the challenge right on those borders.
Right. And when people say, I didn't get any notification that this was going on, I said, well, that's because you're not being asked to evacuate. So
Right.
no news is good news. This is, again, not a news feed. This is you need to get out, because
Yes.
the last fire that we experienced, we had Clackamas and Yamhill County sheriffs going door to door in rural areas near my house where they didn't even know there were houses. So nobody knew who was doing what. This is before we had Everbridge.
Okay.
So this has
I
made a
see.
huge difference.
One comment along those lines too, that a lot of people have asked about is the mapping. Like, can we see maps? And some counties that have more resources have somebody making maps all the time. And Brian Young explained, that his office doesn't have it within the office. But I've seen some emails now about Ken Friday saying, "Hey, we can do this work."
Yeah, when I saw that
That's great.
information, just keeping in mind that our GIS is currently run through our planning department, and we do have some very talented staff that are planners and also do GIS. So I was able to have Ken connect with Brian this morning and find out what they need. And moving forward, again, there's always lessons learned.
Yep.
And that's a resource that, again, sometimes if I would have known that there was a need for it early on, I would have been able to connect that. But again, it's crisis and we learn and always look to improve.
Yeah, I mean, it was 48 hours, so you got it figured out. Or we're on the start to a solution, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
But didn't we have COG doing this work?
Yes, COG
Yes.
COG manages our GIS data and our, and maintains all of our materials. And there's a couple different offices that also, because the assessor's office is also very active in managing with their photography and GIS layers that they collect for their operational need. And then planning also is a heavy user of GIS, and organizationally, GIS was moved under planning many years ago. And so Ken Friday manages the contract with COG for our GIS services, but then we also have staff that have backgrounds and were previously employed as GIS specialists. So are very proficient when it comes to working with Esri software and the GIS materials.
It's nice to know that we're going to have that, kind of going forward. My hope is that this is that at least our county's own needs for those fire maps is going to go down in this particular situation, but it's going to be important going forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't think that this is I don't think this is the end of severe wildfire scenarios. I just hope it's not as bad going forward.
Right. And it's better to get these lessons learned. And I want to note that I was communicating, I got word of folks evacuating from Lincoln County and ending up in Grand Ronde and not knowing kind of where to go to get help. And so the sheriff directed me to, there was going to be a hotline set up through OEM. There wasn't one yet because they didn't have the staff yet. And so it sounds like what they're doing is they're setting up 2 hotlines now. So if you go to the OEM page or to the Facebook page or sheriff's page or Facebook page, there'll be a hotline number for folks who are in county who are needing help because they've had to evacuate. And then there's going to be a hotline for out of county folks who might have needs to get out of their county and not really know where to turn for help. So that was the phone call when I was coming in at 9:58. So stay tuned for that. And I volunteered Joya at the McMinnville Chamber to have somebody man that particular hotline.
You voluntold them.
Yeah, I didn't tell her. So I'm hopeful because the business community around here has really stepped up and churches have really stepped up, but they don't. It's hard to connect through official channels as we've seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I think that covers the call that I was on, National Guard, the insurance claims coordination. And then the other thing that a couple of commissioners asked about, Klamath County and I think Curry County had the experience of having the COVID restrictions specifically challenging their ability to feed fire crews. They come into a restaurant, either it was after the hours, that COVID hours, or there were too many of them to fit into the restaurant at the time. And so the governor in that moment was pulling up their case counts and looking at it. And Nick Blosser was trying to say, okay, how can we make this work? Either temporarily provide an exception, something like that. So it sounds like there might be changes specific to communities. But I think it's going to be important, for the communities that have 90% of homes lost, for example. We're going to need to figure out as a state how to address that.
Absolutely.
So
Thank
I think
you.
that covers the call. Christian, do you have anything?
I just maybe would add on top of everything else, we had all-day mediation with the YCEA union yesterday.
Yep.
I say we had some constructive dialogue, some constructive conversations. Really appreciate all the help of the mediator and the union and Ken and Justin in keeping these conversations going. So I think that's it's been good. We have another session scheduled for 2 weeks, and we may need to come to the board between now and then for an executive session. I don't believe it's necessary today. I think it'd be good if Commissioner Olson could be here as well. So maybe next week, but at some point between now and our next mediation session, we'll probably benefit from having another executive session to give you a more detailed update.
Okay. And I'm happy if we need to have it outside of immediately after
Whenever.
there. I'm sure you can work that up too. Okay.
Mhm.
Great.
After midnight?
After midnight.
The phone now sits beside me, which I've sworn I would never do.
You almost have to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of a necessary evil.
Ken, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I don't.
Okay. Carolina?
No.
Okay. Well, with that, thank you, everybody. We'll close this meeting of the Yamaha County Board of Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner, do you know did